where are the Conservatives in this? The Conservatives have failed to tackle this over all their time, and we really need now to get a grip of this. People are fed up of this sewage problem across our country. Thames Water are one of the worst examples of it, and they're looking to the government to take some action.
If you put Thames Water in a special administrative regime, or if it goes into one, the same problems are still there, aren't they? Which is that the company doesn't appear to have enough cash either coming in or sitting in its bank to be able to look forward to several years of existence in the future.
Well, the special administration regime is designed to deal with that, to make sure you have special people who can come in and run the company without the huge debts that Thames Water has run up. The government itself actually passed legislation quite quietly, that was called a statutory instrument, just over a month ago, preparing for the possibility. But Sarah Olney, the Liberal Democrat Treasury spokesman, had a special debate in Parliament to push them to use that, because it's the best way to protect taxpayers, to protect consumers, and to start getting the investment we need to tackle these problems. So, I mean, the government itself is essentially admitting that the special administrative regime that Liberal Democrats are calling for is a sensible, practical way forward. And we're just saying they should get on and do it.
So this company would then be able to, this new company, would be able to shuck off its old debts and start again?
Well, the special administrative regime is temporary, as Jack was explaining. What we have advocated is that once you've stabilised things, you need to restructure it to create what we call a public interest company. We've looked at different structures in the States and elsewhere, and indeed Welsh Water is a mutual model. And if you did that, you could have a debt-free company that will attract investment and could start planning for the long term. I mean, Thames Water, as you've heard today, are totally unstable, aren't able to attract investment from shareholders. They're saying they might be able to continue for another year. Now, that's just a joke. And the government can't sit by any longer. It's got to take action. People are demanding action to sort out the sewage, and they're demanding that we actually get proper management of our water companies.
We will leave it there. Sir Ed Davey, thank you very much for coming on The World at One. Now, just when you thought global warming couldn't get any more strange, it looks as if it's actually slowing the rotation of the Earth. It's the movement of water from melting ice caps towards the equator that has slowed the rotation of the globe to such an extent that the next leap second, the extra second that gets added to reconcile atomic time to the movement of the Earth, that extra leap second may well get added 3 years later than was previously expected. To help us through this, we're joined by Andrew Shepherd, Head of Geography and Environment Department at Northumbria University, Director of the Centre for Polar Observation and Modelling. Good afternoon, Andrew.
Good afternoon.
Have I explained that correctly, that this is about the movement of water? And if I have, it must be pretty significant amounts.
Yeah, it is. So this water was previously on top of the Greenland ice sheet or the Antarctic ice sheet. And when it melts, it goes into the oceans, and we know about that because it causes sea levels to rise. But there's also a more subtle effect, and it means that the mass moves towards the equator and spread evenly around the planet. And that actually causes the planet to slow down in the same way that a ballerina spinning would slow down if they move their arms outwards.
And I mean, I know that those who have to bring the leap second in are actually fairly relieved about it because it plays havoc with everybody's calculations and clocks. But this is more significant than a leap second here or there. This is another sort of message from the Earth that things are changing.
Yeah, I mean, it's another bad news story, unfortunately, but it's a good example of how climate change affects all kinds of different parts of our lives. You might not think it's important that the Earth is slowing down, but that changes all of the satellite telecommunications that we rely on, and people have to take account of that to make sure that the GPS system is as precise as we want it to be, and all of that has to go on in the background because, of course, we don't program those satellites, but everyone else has to.
Are you surprised by this finding?
So it's quite interesting that the fingerprint of climate change crops up in all kinds of different records. I was quite surprised to see the geodesists, people who look at the Earth and time, have spotted it, and I guess they were saying what's going on here, something must be happening, and they're not climate scientists, so they had to hunt around for the source of this, and then stumbled upon the fact that our polar ice sheets are melting at a colossal rate, and so they have to join the dots, and that's science, really.
Andrew, thank you very much indeed. Andrew Shepherd there from University of Northumberland. A teaching union says its members are reporting that levels of violence and abuse from pupils have risen significantly since the COVID pandemic. It comes as nearly 1 in 5 teachers in England, taking part in a survey commissioned by the BBC, revealed they've been hit by a student this year. Here's our education correspondent, Elaine Duncan.
This is St John Fisher Catholic Academy, a secondary school in Dewsbury with a bad reputation.
Children were being suspended as early as 9:15 in the morning.
Rated inadequate and described by Ofsted as unsafe for teachers and pupils.
There was a culture of bullying. There was frequent fighting, like multiple fights on a daily basis, and there was an atmosphere of intimidation.
Head teacher Carl Mackey joined the school a year ago, tasked with getting behaviour under control.
This year, you'll see them in lessons every single day.
With small steps, Mr Mackey is making big changes to behaviour.
Oh, sorry.
It's okay.
How are you doing? You having a nice day? Yeah.
Good.
Sorry, sir.
That's quite all right.
Corridors are locked down in lesson time to stop students wandering off. Mobile phones are banned, and the toilets can only be used at certain times.
We had a lot of internal truancy. Children were going into cubicles. I'm pretty sure they were vaping in there. We were spending, at times, thousands of pounds per week on damage.
Have you had much resistance from pupils and parents about some of these changes?
No resistance.
The changes in behaviour have received a glowing report from pupils.
It was destructive to a lot of people, a lot of students, a lot of teachers, and loads of fighting, sometimes with teachers. Mr Mackey, yeah, his methods have massively worked. He's worked up in baby steps.
Like, I used to have friends who go to other schools, and there I was like, oh, Fishers, this is what a horrible place to go, but they've never been here. And now, when you have visitors coming, I'm proud to call it my school because it's so calm.
Teachers here tell me an increasing number of children struggling to get support for special educational needs, difficult home lives, and a lack of services for mental health are all part of the problem. Amy Finley is the assistant head.
We're setting students up to fail if we're just allowing them to go through a system without adequate support in place. I think it's really important that we identify what their needs are and look at how we can adapt what we do as a school to meet those needs to ultimately make them as successful as they possibly can be.
A survey commissioned by the BBC found almost a fifth of teachers that responded have been hit by a pupil this year. And it's not just an issue with pupils. Natasha Nicholson from the National Association of Head Teachers says school leaders are also dealing with abuse from a minority of parents.
The severity of some of the abuse that our school leaders and school staff are facing has been eye-opening. The examples we've been given are slashed tyres, people not able to sleep at night because of the worries and the threats of physical violence, the intimidation. In the last 6 months alone, I've supported numerous members who've decided that it's not a career for them, and often the final nail in the coffin is the physical abuse from parents.
The government says no teacher should feel unsafe or face violence in the workplace and has invested £10 million into behaviour hubs, where schools work together offering mentoring and support to those which are struggling. Dealing with the root causes of behaviour can be complex. Teaching unions say violence and abuse in schools has got worse since the pandemic.
Your shirt's hanging out.
For many, it's a tough time to be in teaching. But despite the challenges, the rewards are high for head teachers like Mr Mackey.
I just think it's a really lovely place to work. I'm immensely proud to be the head teacher here. And before long, it's our intention that this is the best school in West Yorkshire, not only in Dewsbury.
That report from Elaine Dunkley. Well, how do you sort out bad pupil behaviour? Can behaviour hubs be the answer? And Mulholland is the head teacher are at St Margaret Clitheroe Catholic Primary School in Bracknell. Her school also enrolled in the government's Behaviour Hub programme. Anne Longfield is Executive Chair of the Centre for Young Lives. Of course, she was the Children's Commissioner for England before that. Anne Mulholland, can I start with you? Tell me about your school when you joined in Jan 2020.
Well, it was a very different place to what we are facing now. Lots of dysregulated children, children clearly not following rules or boundaries, violent attacks on staff, teachers, physical attacks and verbal attacks, lots of checking out of lessons, going and seeing if they fancy that lesson or not. Just very, very basic things that were all in place prior to the pandemic that had gone completely awry. And I was joining with a fresh pair of eyes in the January 22.
So your school joined the Behaviour Hub programme. Can you give me an idea of the turnaround since then?
So we joined them in the March of that year, and then you have that first term to really get your vision, work out what you want your school to look like, how you want it to feel, that safe, calm expectations. And then the big launch was in the September, so launch to parents. All staff knew what they were doing, all the children were educated in our rules and our expectations. And then it was that first 6 weeks where we had to be rigorous, we had to be on it, we really, really focused so much on our behaviour. And it was really that energy and effort we put into that 6 weeks that has just paid absolute dividends going forward. And the turnaround has been huge, absolutely huge in our school.
And Longfield, when you hear that, do you start to begin that behaviour hubs are the answer?
Well, I think certainly huge interventions needed to tackle what we're seeing in terms of behaviour, and you know, no one should go into work feeling unsafe, and it is no wonder we've got such a recruitment crisis. But behaviour hubs help schools manage the situation, and that's obviously really important and fantastic to hear. But what we've got really is a problem that is very real in children's lives, and you heard that in the comments of others there. You know, the number of children in poverty is now a third. We've got unmet special educational needs hugely rocketing, mental health again really plummeting. This was all happening before the pandemic, but it was absolutely skyrocketed by the pandemic, and every school will see that differently, often year in year, but they will see it in their pupils, and we won't resolve this until we tackle those root causes. We'll still be here in years to come. Is it very old-fashioned to think about parents and their role with their children? Well, I don't think it is old-fashioned at all. You know, parents are the ones who bring up their children, and so they should be. In many ways, both children and their teachers are paying the price for these kind of root causes that I'm talking about, not being kind of tackled head on. But there has to be a good relationship with parents to get there, and I think what you've just heard from Anne is a way of building that relationship. Parents have to know that their children are getting the help that they need, and working with schools and with others, because schools can't do this alone. But when your child's not getting help, when you can see your child deteriorating, when your child can't self-regulate, when they aren't able to cope with the school environment, and there's absolutely nowhere for them to go, parents will want to know that they're doing something. And I think, again, schools are the ones in a terrible situation as a result. And Anne Mulholland, you have worked hard to bring parents into the operation, haven't you, to make them part of the behaviour hub, or at least part of their children's improvement?
Yeah, no, absolutely. It was about building our community, building that trust, that mutual respect, ensuring the communication was, you know, really clear, both the positive and negative behaviours. And, you know, as well as, you know, children do become dysregulated, and it's really teaching them what is okay, and it's okay to be angry, it's okay to be upset. It's, you know, how you express that, and we show them how to do that in a way in our school that's safe for everybody. If they need time out, then they know how to do that safely and respectfully, so people know where they are. Anne Mulholland, Anne Longfield, thank you so much for sharing your time and your experiences with us.
Once a young rebel shaking up a fusty broadcasting establishment, Radio Caroline, which perched offshore and beamed in music to the UK, is 60 years old today, and the Easter weekend will see a special 3-day broadcast. Caroline launched the careers of many DJs, and a fair few bands got airtime on the channel that they couldn't get elsewhere. Tony Blackburn and Johnny Walker are some of the names whose careers started there, but there are some surprising people with memories of working on Radio Caroline, amongst them the current Conservative MP for Thanet North, Sir Roger Gale. He told me how he ended up on the boat.
Serving the British Isles, 14 swinging out a day, this is 199 Radio Caroline.
I trained as an actor at the Guildhall School of Music and Drama. I did a season of Shakespeare at the Shaftesbury Theatre, and like actors do, I was then out of work. And a friend of mine, who was an opera singer, in fact, but working as the programme assistant to the programme director for Radio Caroline, rang me up and said, "Have you ever thought about being a disc jockey?" I said, "No." And she said, "Well, do you know anything about pop music?" And I said, "No." And she said, "Well, do you like it?" And I said, "Well, some." And she said, "Well, you're coming in to make tapes for us tomorrow morning." So I went into Caroline House and did some audition tapes, which were frightful, because I really didn't know what I was doing. And the programme director said, "That was not very good, babe. Could you be out on the boat Monday?" And that was Chris Moore, the Canadian programme director.
Hello and happy Easter to all of you. This is Christopher Moore with the first record programme on Radio Caroline.
Tell me about going out on the boat, because it's not how most people go to work.
There was the Caroline, Radio Caroline, but the Caroline boat, which was moored with a deep sea anchor about 3.5 miles off Ramsey, Isle of Man. So we had to fly to the Isle of Man, cross the ferry bridge between Douglas and Ramsey, get on the fishing boat, and chug 3.5 miles to Radio Caroline. And we spent 2 weeks on and a week off.
And what about the music? Because this is pre-Radio 1, with Caroline sort of trying to bash some new music out into the airwaves that wasn't really getting there so far.
The whole point about Radio Caroline was that it was an alternative to Radio Luxembourg. The quality of the broadcasting from Radio Caroline North and Radio Caroline South was a lot better.
All right, now everybody move to the whiplash.
Choice. We played what we wanted to play. We did have a sort of a playlist, but a lot of it was just run-of-the-mill, straightforward Mersey beat, Mersey sound. The Beatles were in their heyday, Jerry and the Pacemakers.
How do you do what you...
Plus some almost middle-of-the-road music. One of the first hits that I played on air on Radio Caroline North was Petula Clark's Downtown.
You can always go.
Music, I don't think. It got quite hairy at times. We tried to keep on broadcasting throughout the bad weather, and there was some. Radio Caroline North had engines, so the captain was able to turn the ship into the wind and steam over the anchor. You couldn't pull the anchor up, it was laid by a steam, and try and keep the boat as steady as possible so we could carry on broadcasting.
To invest in this space, and what we see is that there is a gap in this. I mean, either there is the venture capital around climate, or there is the big infrastructure project. But in between, there are a lot of proven technologies in good companies that really need support. And it's those ones that we are really want to support and target and grow.
And let's just close off with a flyer. Why not? I know that you were tempted by sports before. We see the Saudis, gorging on sport around the world. Are you tempted by any aspect of sport or assets in sport?
Well, we like sport. I mean, we really like the business there because obviously we see a lot of good growth there, but it's also great for.
What do you prefer? Football? Do you like some American sport? What do you fancy?
Well, let's look at opportunities and see what happens with.
Mohammed, thank you so much for being with us. We won't get the breaking news on which sports team you're after. But anyway, the Executive Chairman, Mohammed Al Hadi there of Investcorp, on infrastructure investing here in the US and private credit markets. Coming up, the crypto world. We're watching Sam Bankman-Fried's sentencing.
We suffered a lot of damage to trust in the end of 21 and 2022, and getting that behind us is a good thing, period. I wish SBF well.
Our conversation next on Bloomberg. Good morning from New York.
Get the latest news at the click of a button inside your car. The new Bloomberg Business app, now featuring Apple CarPlay and Android Auto. Listen to all of your favourite Bloomberg radio stations and podcasts, plus the latest news all on your dashboard. It's free and easy to use. Just download the Bloomberg Business app and connect the phone to your car. The Bloomberg Business app, now with Apple CarPlay and Android Auto features. Download it free in the Apple App Store or on Google Play.
Bloomberg Radio, on demand and in your pocket.
Somebody yesterday, she said to me, she's like, well, when she first borrowed a dog, it was because she just moved to London, it was during the pandemic.
This is Ricky Rosenlund, founder of Borrow My Doggy, an online platform that connects local owners with people who want to look after a dog.
She really missed people and she was quite lonely, so she helped take care of a dog, and then she was getting married, so the owner ended up becoming bridesmaid for her wedding. And then the last thing that has now happened is the owner is quite sick, so now she's really helping the owner out again. So we see stories like that, and we have seen so many stories. Another one we've seen a lot of is like where people end up having Christmas together. We have people where, I think this even happened to one of my team members, where one of the owner's friends, who also a borrower, ended up moving into one of the other borrowers' houses because she needed a temporary place to stay. I mean, it just shows the kind of the relationship that builds out on our platform, right? I can keep on telling you stories the entire day.
I first met Ricky over 10 years ago when she was in the early days of building her platform. At the time, I was writing about innovations in the nascent sharing economy. There was a certain paradox at play during this time. While I kept hearing about how trust was in a state of rapid decline, we no longer had faith in our banks, our media, our politicians. On the flip side, there were new technologies and platforms allowing us to interact with strangers, all of which required a phenomenal leap of trust. I realized that trust is like energy. It doesn't get destroyed, it changes form. And here we were in the early stages of our third trust shift. So let's take Ricky's example. Maybe you have a dog. The dog has the capacity to give things to people. Connection, love, exercise, all these benefits. And you have another person that wants or needs these things. Technology creates the efficiency to match the supply with the demand. And it also enables a critical ingredient for those interactions and exchanges to happen. Trust between strangers. I'm Rachel Botsman, and over 5 episodes, I'm taking you into the intriguing history of trust. This is episode 4, Distributed Trust. Every act of creation is first an act of destruction, Picasso famously once said. This applies to trust as much as to art. In previous episodes, we've traced the evolution of trust as it developed from local interactions with those we knew in our communities to institutional trust that was needed for a global industrialized age. Today, we're experiencing another profound trust shift, a move to what I call distributed trust. The kind of trust that used to be centralized in institutions, which is often hierarchical and controlled, is now being distributed through networks and platforms. Trust spreads sideways instead of top down. If we're thinking about money, this would be like going from using your local money lender, whom you know by name, to your bank, the institution, to decentralized forms of finance like cryptocurrencies. Or if it's the media, we went from the local town crier who shared information to the institutional trust of media companies that led us to read newspapers or watch the 6 o'clock national news. And now, of course, we have social media, which distributes the flow of information across the likes of TikTok, Reddit, Facebook, or Twitter. I mean X. For better or worse, this shift is facilitating the sharing of trust across vast networks of people on a scale and in ways that wasn't possible before. What initially fascinated me about distributed trust was its potential to revive more personalized, community-driven forms of trust. The Good Gym platform, for instance, connects elderly and isolated people with young people who want to run, bringing them a newspaper and stopping for a chat. Or there's Landshare, linking thousands of people with unused garden space with those who want to grow their own food. All around us, platforms enable people to unlock what I call idling capacity of all kinds of assets. Spare rooms in their homes, their cars, skills, unused stuff, and yes, dogs, and find matches. Critical to the success and safety of these platforms is how they are designed for trust. This means considering if the way we build trust in person works the same way online, when it's often between strangers. Imagine now you're explaining the idea, let's take my dad. My dad is like skeptical of everything, right, online. How do you explain how it works, right? We've got a dog called Mac, who's like the third child in the family. So imagine we're going to put Mac up to be walked. How does it work?
Both owners and borrowers will join our platform. They will create a profile. They will upload photos. They will write a little bit about themselves. And then once they've done that, they will go in and search for members in their local area. And then they will reach out to other members and then, meet up, see how you get along, and if you like each other. Some people meet several times, some people do house visits, and that's how relationships are built. It's built in meeting, feeling comfortable, and the thing about our members is many of them live close to each other, so they will go probably to the same restaurants, or the kids might go to the same school, or so it's all about building connections in your local neighborhood.
Borrow My Doggy in many ways is like, it's a bad analogy, but a dating platform, right? So you're using the internet to get off the internet to meet in real life. It's online to offline trust, which is very different from, say, when you just buy something on eBay and you're never going to meet that person. So what have you learned about how trust is formed between two sides of the marketplace and the initial trust signals that people look for when they're looking at those profiles?
What I learned early on, it's people build trust very differently. Some people, become the bestest of friends in absolutely no time, and other people, they might meet up 10 times and the owner is never really convinced that they actually trust anyone with their dog. So we all have just very different preferences, and our job is to understand and respect the differences in people's preferences while we try to build something that is as safe as possible within those parameters.
From studying hundreds of platforms and marketplaces, I found there are common patterns in how they enable our trust. I call this the trust stack. You need trust in the idea, the platform, and other people, often strangers, for distributed trust to work. Consider another platform, BlaBlaCar, started in France.
Faire le plein d'essence vous donne des sueurs froides. Partez avec BlaBlaCar, l'appli de covoiturage. Conducteur, entrez les détails de votre trajet.
It matches drivers with passengers who want to share long-distance journeys together. And it's remarkable that this idea works at all, because it's counter to the lesson we learn as a child. Never get in a car with a stranger. So first, you have to trust the idea of ride-sharing, that it's safe and worth trying. Then there's having confidence in the platform, that it will help prevent things from going wrong. That's where platforms use security and background checks, payment and identity verification, insurance, customer support, that kind of thing. And lastly, it's about deciding whether the other person is trustworthy. On BlaBlaCar, like most platforms, this is helped through ratings and reviews, just like the medieval traders in our first episode. For Ricky and Borrow My Doggy, it's about enabling meetups in the real world.
One of our early members said by the time she lent out her dog, the borrower wasn't a stranger anymore, it was a friend, right? By the time that you're comfortable, it is because you actually know that person. And the chemistry between two people, it just changes so much from pair to pair or match to match.
When we first take a trust leap in a new idea, it feels weird, even risky. But then we get to a point of social proof, where these ideas seem totally normal and our behaviors transform, often relatively quickly. In other words, trust enables innovation. It changes how we travel, bank, work, and consume.
It would take me back to my early optimism in the sharing economy, where I was like, I thought this was what it was going to be all about, sort of recreating the fabric of communities. It wasn't meant to be about things like Uber, like these massive scale platforms. But let's focus on that a little bit. Let's focus, early on you talked about impact on people's lives, and you used the words local and community. I think it's kind of wonderful in many ways that technology sort of reinvents those local forms of trust that society was based on. I'm wondered, what have you seen, Ricky, that has really surprised or delighted you in terms of how you've seen how people can trust one another?
I think we all really want to trust each other. And I think obviously there's a lot of good reasons why, from an online perspective, that people are losing trust. But from an in-person perspective, I feel, people really want to trust each other, and people really do trust each other. But it's something that you earn, right, by getting to know each other. It's not something that you can just ping somebody you have seen online or kind of met for 2 seconds and then send a message to via LinkedIn afterwards. That's not how trust is built. I feel you just need to take time to build that trust, but I definitely feel that people want to build it.
I agree with Ricky here, that people are for the most part naturally trusting, and digital technologies can help enable that trust. But that also, something which used to take time, the forging of trust, has accelerated. It's both exhilarating and challenging, because speed can be the enemy of trust. Often, to make informed trust decisions, we need to slow down and ask ourselves, is this person, piece of information, or product worthy of our trust? But we don't, because we can get a ride, a date, borrow a dog, buy a product, book a holiday home, or get the news on, well, anything, with a few taps or swipes of our smartphone. We don't thoroughly read reviews or even know if they are real or fraudulent. We don't always stop to think whether this might be a fake profile or a scam. And if we really want the thing now, convenience can so often trump trust. And so while distributed trust can facilitate all kinds of powerful interactions on and offline, it can also create serious problems. And who is responsible when things go wrong? How should platforms be held accountable for the transactions and exchanges they help facilitate? It's a whole new world of trust, where regulators and the law are trying to figure out how best to protect people and create new social safety nets. We're experiencing this problem acutely with information and social media. We can't even trust what we see or hear, or even if that person is real anymore. With the rapid rise of generative AI, the question is, whether this trust challenge will get better or worse. Join me for the final episode of The Trust Shift.
And you can hear that episode at the same time tomorrow. The Trust Shift was produced by Eliza Lomas, and it's a BBC audio production for Radio 4. After the news, we're off to Ambridge, where, as usual, George has some apologising to do. The Archers is in a couple of minutes.
On BBC iPlayer.
66 million years ago, an asteroid was on a direct collision course with the Earth. Out of the darkness that followed, emerged a group that went on to dominate the world.
Mammals with David Attenborough.
In this series, we'll reveal the secrets behind their success.
It's a sperm whale. Wow!
And the challenges they now face in a world dominated by the most successful mammal of all. Us. Look at that!
Mammals begins on Sunday on BBC iPlayer.
BBC News at 2 o'clock. The UK's biggest water company, Thames Water, has blamed industry regulations for its failure to raise a much-needed £500 million. The firm is about £15 billion in debt, and shareholders said they would inject more money if water bills were increased significantly. The regulator Ofwat has rejected their proposal. The UN's Human Rights Committee has told the government it should withdraw proposed legislation which declares Rwanda a safe country. The law is part of government efforts to deport some asylum seekers to the African country. Our Geneva correspondent Imogen Folks is following developments.
There are particular clauses in the Illegal Migration Act which the committee says would violate international law, particularly, technical term coming up here, the principle of non-refoulement, which means countries should not send people to countries which are deemed not safe. We know what the UK Supreme Court ruled on Rwanda, that it wasn't safe, and the committee is saying that it doesn't quite work for a government just to then rule that a country is safe.